Aloha, everyone. We are going to actually come back to this space together and prepare ourselves mentally, spiritually, and physically for our panel discussion. So, our theme is regional and local food systems. As we see it, a localized, regionalized food system would really allow communities to share food with each other, thus uniting all activities and actors from both formal and informal branches of the food system onto one stage. This stage would take the shape of an alternative economy solely based on the value of food and seed through the catalyst of a decentralized intergenerational social network, much like those of barter and trade systems from civilizations past. With this new currency of exchange and direct to consumer source for food, a new improved access to food would be given to all members of the community. They would have access to both an adequate amount of affordable, cultural, and culturally appropriate food. And, while it's important that our local farms and businesses maintain economic vitality, the value of Hawaii's food supply chain goes far beyond its economic contribution, as it provides opportunities for people to engage in food citizenship. I think this fundamental shift in the structure of the food system would be a step towards a more integrative way of living, which would really connect humanity to the laws of ecological governance so that we uphold our duty as one piece in the larger puzzle of systemic value. So I'm now going to pass it off to Julie and Chay, our chat monitors and panel kind of moderators, to introduce themselves and also share a little bit about what localizing and regionalizing food systems mean to them. And then we'll introduce our panelists.
Hello, everyone. Again, hopefully you can all hear me. Sorry if there's some background noise. I don't know where it's coming from. Again, hello, I'm Julie. I'm currently a senior at Honolulu Schools, and I joined the Hawaii Youth Food Council because I've always been interested in agricultural science, life science, just, like the environment overall. And I hadn't really had any opportunities to, I guess, expand my interests and knowledge. So when I came across Hawaii Youth Food Council, I was immediately into it. It really piqued my interest. And so I worked on my application as soon as I could, and I submitted it, and I was luckily granted membership of the council. And so that's just a little bit about me. Yeah. Oh, and also the theme for our panel is localizing and regionalizing food systems. And to me, that's kind of just bring back the importance of Hawaii. I'm really focusing on the importance of taking care of not just the food that we eat, but also ourselves and the health of our community.
Thank you, Julie. So I'm Chay, and I joined the Hawaii Youth Food Council because, like I was saying earlier, when I was younger, my grandpa taught me a lot about just growing our own food and being able to eat what we make. And it's really important that I felt that it's really important that other people get to experience that. And I know that that's not really where we're at with our food systems right now, but it should be that way in our schools. We should be able to have access to food that we grow ourselves, or just stuff that comes from our island, not stuff that's imported, because as we all know, a lot of our food is imported, and we have so much resources to not have to do that, but yet we don't take advantage of that. And I think it's just really important to be able to integrate our own food into our own lives. So next we will have Tyler starting to introduce our panelists. So thank you to our panelists for coming.
Yes, thank you, panelists. I will first introduce Dexter. So Dexter's passion is to connect communities to their food. For the past 8 years, he has worked for the Department of Education School Food Services branch, most recently as their farm to school coordinator. Now, as the city and county of Honolulu's food security and sustainability manager in the Office of Economic Revitalization, his mission is to connect communities to high quality, locally produced food that connects them to Hawaii. Pass it off to Julie.
Thank you, Tyler. I will be introducing Noah. Noah Lincoln is I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, Kanaka Maoli and Kama'aina to Keala Kekuewa on Hawaii Island. And his childhood consists of training in La'au, which is ethnobotany and traditional management methods for agriculture and ocean resources. Dr. Lincoln completed his formal trainings at Yale University in environmental engineering and Stanford University in biogeochemistry and social ecology. He has worked with and studied traditional agriculture and land management around the Pacific Rim, including with native peoples of present-day US, Costa Rica, Brazil, New Zealand, Tahiti, and Samoa, among other places. Dr. Lincoln is a research professor at the UH Manoa, where his indigenous cropping systems laboratory researches a spectrum of areas, including forest ecology and management, restoration ecology, archaeology, personal values, and sense of place, ecosystems services, and terrestrial biogeochemistry with both natural and human-dominated systems, i.e. agriculture. His primary focus, however, is on indigenous cropping systems and their interaction with human societies in both the past and the present. His work in contemporary food systems encompasses both research and application, and he serves on a number of working groups, nonprofit organizations, and agricultural associations to support more sustainable and just food systems. And we would like to thank you so much for being a part of our panel.
Thank you, Julie. And last but not least, our last panelist is Mr. Jesse Lipman. He has worked 30 years of experience in community-based programs, primarily in Kalihi and Chicago. He's worked with Michelle Obama, as well as a lot of everyday people who continue to teach him the ways food connects us to our past and future. Currently, he is the food programs coordinator for Kōkua Kalihi Valley's Roots program, where he manages their commercial kitchen, serves as cafe chef, and develops programs to bring affordable and healthy local food to the people of Kalihi. Again, we just wanted to thank all three of you for coming on today to speak with us, and we will get into the questions. So, Julie,
Yes, so
Tyler.
yeah, we'll get into the questions, but before we do, I just quickly want to mention that if you all have any questions, talking to the audience, please write them in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them at the last few minutes of our panel. So I'll now hand it off to Julie, and we're excited to hear all of your voices and thoughts.
So the first question is, this applies to all three panelists. I guess you guys can go in the order on the slide if that's just easier, or whichever way you'd like. But the question is, what does a local/regional food system look like to you, and how would it work?
Well,
That's
if oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Noah.
I mean, I guess the first thought that came to mind, right, is how are those areas defined, right? And how local is local, for instance. And I guess I see the answer to that as there will be nested localities, right, in any of those systems, that the community level right? Production and kind of almost barter system that Tyler was talking about is part of it, you know, but so is you know, expanded, you know, in our case in Hawaii, like an island-wide system, and then of course a statewide system. But you know, the essence of it, you know, of what is a local or regional food system is really just a locality producing and distributing its own food and feeding itself. And so, you know, I mean, I think our terminology is also important, right? There's nothing, for instance, necessarily sustainable about just a local food system, right? You can produce food locally in a horrible way. But what I feel is very strong about a local or regional food system, right, is as Tyler mentioned several times, right, the fact that you can start to interact with your food system. You know, you can start to influence it and hold it accountable. And, you know, if there are poor environmental practices, right, then they're happening right in your backyard and you're aware of them and you're gonna, you know, you're going to take action. Whereas if food's being imported, right, like you don't see those effects, right? You don't see the effect of a CAFO, you know, industrial milk operation if you're importing milk from halfway around the world. But when we started doing a dairy here in O'Okala again, right, and everyone saw, oh my God, this is having a massive effect on our stream health in our rivers, you know, it got shut down because it was happening locally. And so that potential to see and interact with your local food system, I think is a yeah, big part of the outcome. And I'll stop there.
I can
Go
go
ahead,
next.
Jesse, jump in. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't know I was supposed to be in my car for this session. But
Wait, you didn't get it was in the email, I think someone sent out.
To answer the question, I think the first thing, just to kind of go off of a little bit of what Noah was saying, is you got to prioritize local people and Hawaiians if you're going to build a local food system. So, you know, think about what your starting point is with a food system. People who, you know, kama'aina, people who are longtime residents, people who are connected to the land ancestrally, they're going to have a good starting point for understanding and how to build a local system, and you need to support those folks. If the system is built more towards the needs of tourists or visitors or part-time residents, they're by nature going to have less connection to the local food system. So I think having a good starting point in terms of how we look at the system and put our resources towards it is really crucial. So I would just leave that as kind of a foundational thing, and then we can get a little bit more into the details as we go forward.
I'm glad both of you took the first stab at this, because like they decided to jump into the deep end of the pool straight out of the gate. Amazing question. And coming from my perspective, I think, especially with my government hat on, our role should be listening and then implementing what communities are saying. So like what Jesse and kind of Noah shared. And that's why I'm maybe bad at my job, because I talk way too much. Maybe one piece that I would add in there is access and equity. That as we rebuild or as we build this localized food system, then everybody's got to have access to great food, or it's not going to be, or it doesn't work. So I don't have the answer yet how to get there. Hence maybe the listening to community and how we did it before. We fed everyone back in the day. How do we do that again? And maybe in a modern interpretation.
Wow, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to bounce off that just a little bit, because I was looking at your mission, and your mission statement says a just and equitable local food system for a healthier Hawaii. So I would add that as we think about equity and building a local food system, see equity from multiple perspectives within the food system. You know, for some people, they may really depend on gathering food. So what's equitable to them means a lot of access to gathering cultural food. Somebody who's getting a lot of their food from the ocean, you know, their equity is having a healthy ocean, controlling runoff, having good water treatment systems, making sure, you know, dairy farms or things like that are not polluting the system. Some people are hunters, you know, and their access may be managing those invasive protein sources, which are good food for people, but also can be problematic. And they have a lot of knowledge in terms of how to manage that resource. You know, some folks are working within the larger farms on the island. So as we think about food system equity for somebody who's a wage laborer at a large farm, that may mean you're not having to deal with toxic pesticides and things like that, and be able to, in a healthy way, harvest food and get it to people. So just casting a wide net as you look at equity, and really thinking about equity from the perspectives of all those different types of folks who are part of the local food system, who come from, you know, different places in terms of how they interact with it.
So before our next question, we have a question in the comments by Lisa. What would you all say to other young people about our place and belonging within the food system? I know, especially when you're younger, it's hard to feel like you have a voice just because, you know, not many people might listen, but where do you think we can fit into all of this?
Well, I think there's a lot of places. If no one's piping up, you know, I mean, one way, you know, a really obvious way that I really think is undervalued is the vote with your dollar, you know, concept. What we choose to eat and choose to support in terms of what we put on our plate and where we spend our food dollar is really impactful. And you know, I mean, when my wife was starting the Hawaii Ulu Co-op, and we were running a lot of the numbers and thinking about, you know, well, what's it really going to cost to get breadfruit, you know, to the stores and to people, and you know, the numbers came out really high. And, you know, I was really disheartened, and I was like, you know, nobody's going to buy a starch at this price, you know, when rice is 20 cents a pound or whatever it is. And she's like, oh, come on, dude, people go to Starbucks every day and drop $5 on an orange Frappuccino, you know, without even thinking about it. And there's a lot of that, you know. I mean, we spend so much money on supporting really horrible agricultural practices. You know, if you buy chips or sodas or, you know, any of this stuff, it's just you know, continually feeding into supporting, you know, the status quo. And you know, it's something that, I don't know, I feel often gets kind of shoved under the table. And we're always quick to say like local food's too expensive, but then again, I see people, you know, buying, you know, specialty imported products, or again, you know, that $5 Starbucks coffee, you know, that yeah, that money could go to be supporting much better practices, and in particular be supporting local production. So I think that's a simple, you know, first step that everyone can take.
Just to cut in here briefly, I'm not a panelist, actually. I'll let the panel people talk, but I wanted to say one thing because this is something I've been thinking about a lot. Like you mentioned, Noah, there is a lot of power that we have with our bucks. There is voting with your bucks, but then there are those who don't have bucks to vote. And so my question is, can we be looked upon as anything more than a consumer? can we be participants in the food system to a level, to a degree that is beyond that of a consumer? And if so, what would it be? And how do we create a more just, equitable food system where people do have access to all forms of their localized food economy, whether it's, the gifts from their neighbor or the gifts from the sea, the land, the forest, the trees, or farmers market and other ways of obtaining food from a community. I guess those are some things that have come up, but I know, Dexter, you were unmuted, so I want you
Sorry.
to flow into whatever thought process you.
No, so like Noah's statement, first thing that came to mind was the power of a whiny voice. Now, I only partly so, because my children don't have money to spend on food, right? I buy that for them. But if we're in the middle of the grocery store and the kid is going to whine about getting Captain Crunch cereal or longan, I'm probably apt to do that. And a really good example happened in Nanakuli area on Oahu, where the schools served certain type of peach, I think it was. And the grocery stores in the area ended up calling school food because that peach was being asked for by just a ton of parents. And it's because their third, fourth, fifth, maybe even first grader was saying, I tasted this amazing thing at school, I want it. And so mommy, daddy, grandma, grandpa go to the grocery store and try and buy it, or there's a run on these peaches. So even though there's no dollar that you're in direct control of, you definitely have the power of your voice, and do it nicely to your parents, right? Not like the whiny kid that's going to be, well, then again, maybe that'd be cool to get a Instagram video of someone, I'm sorry, TikTok, I'm old, video of somebody that's rolling around the floor screaming because they wanted lettuce or a microgreen. That would be kind of cool to see. Usually we don't see that. But the other piece, if we take that one step up, to the power of your voice is really, really important, and something that we shouldn't lose track of. I was reminded yesterday at my son's 5th grade play, they kind of took us from the overthrow to Red Hill in about an hour and a half. And it was their class project or grade level project. And it reminded me over and over again, one, how smart Hawaiians are, and two, how they played in the game that was set before them. That if during the annexation, they made sure they studied law so they could fight on the same ground that the rest of the world was. They played on the world stage. So what do we need as people and women, children, men, kupuna across the board, is you to be the very best at what you do while being educated in where your food comes from, so you can best advocate for that. Because if you're going to be a lawyer, be the best lawyer you can be, but make sure you're not going to be supporting the big ag that may be pillaging our environment. Or if you're going to be a scientist, then be the best scientist. If you're going to be the engineer, be the best engineer, because we're going to need those as we figure out climate change and how that's affecting how we grow and what we grow and how we eat. We did this globalized food system. Wow, it was pretty cool. Is it working though? So we need some crazy masterminds to remap this and be able to now shift us back. So in any role you do, you have amazing power of voice and just be the best you can be.
Thank you, Dexter. I want to pass it off to Jesse. We want to hear from you.
Thank you. So one word that came up in the questions and the responses was power. And I would say to the younger folks who are part of this conversation, understand that power, we're talking about political power or economic power, does not give up any of their power on their own. Even if their practices are problematic, even if their policies are not strong, they're not going to change that just because it's not working well. They're going to change it because they're being pushed from other places. And you as young people, you are living in the future longer than any of us on this panel, so it's your future to claim, so speak your truth. Don't hold back, continue to do things like you're doing right now and organizing this summit, but speak loudly and speak strongly. And that can be done with respect, but, make sure you claim your space. I will go back to some of the racial justice protests that happened a few years ago, and those were led by young people from, throughout Hawaii and the country, and really changed a lot of the conversation about issues, at least for a period of time they did. So, you guys have the power to do that, but you'll need to assert yourself to do it. Nobody's going to just be nice and cede power to younger people because their ideas are more balanced with ecology and things like that.
Thank you, Jesse. I do have another question that applies to everyone, so I'd love to hear everyone's input. Schools are some of the best examples of sustainable community food systems here in Hawaii because with our keiki leading the way in composting school food waste, organizing food distribution campaigns, establishing school farms, and growing a food culture. There's just a lot of opportunities to make changes in schools. And so I was wondering, how do each of you plan to include schools, if you are planning, include schools, their keiki, and their ever-evolving food systems in your field of food work? And if not applicable, kind of like,
how would you?
Yeah, like hypothetically.
Thinking outside the box.
Oh, sorry. Could Dr. Lincoln start first?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've been long time engaged in supporting schools, mostly here on the Big Island. In my previous role as a educator with Amy Greenwell Garden, I mean, we helped establish 17 school gardens on the Big Island, as well as some of the food waste composting programs. More recently, we've worked a lot to try to start distributing food trees to campuses, which is a hard sell. A lot of times, the schools are worried about maintenance. Same thing as the cities, right? They don't want to plant food trees because then if the food's dropping on the ground, like they always argue, oh, rats and pests and this. And there's always a reason why they'd rather plant a landscaping tree than a food tree. But yeah, we've been working to support, people working in the schools to try to get more tree-based agriculture, which, I think is just part of, the future of ag in general. When we look at how food was grown around the world, prior to kind of European colonization, food systems were extremely diverse, but trees were an integral part of how food was produced because they support ecosystem health and nutrient cycling and things like this. And so, yeah, that's kind of been one of our big priorities is, reintroducing trees to agriculture. And as part of that, yeah, is kind of introducing them to our schools to be producing food and demonstrating, right, the value of a tree and especially trees in our food system. Yeah, I don't know. I'll pass it to Dex, maybe.
Sure. In my move to the city, definitely less interaction with students, but also know it's absolutely essential as one of the initiatives in our office is workforce development and kind of looking into a crystal ball, what is going to be the next workforce that's needed and start putting money into that. But what's great is our office's realization is that it actually starts a few steps before. So that's why we will or do continue to work, and whether it's funding opportunities in the very near future for schools to apply for, or programming, or just network connections or information sharing, whatever it is, because we know that the pipeline doesn't start at age 19. Miraculously, you're ready for a workforce, that we've got to start way before. And actually, waste is one area, the waste stream, as a terribly underdeveloped sector of our economy, that we could flip to be to have quite a lot of growth with a little bit of investment. So one area that we're looking in.
I would connect some of the conversation on schools just to the larger issue of institutional purchasing. So we tend to think of ourselves as a consumer culture, but that discounts all the institutions, you know, the hospitals, the schools, the prisons, the care homes, hotels, these larger institutions that actually purchase a lot of the food or are responsible for a lot of the food waste. So, you know, getting food into the DOE that's more localized is happening. It's a challenge because it's a big system. And Dexter can really get more into the details on that conversation. But we're, you know, looking at how you can get the institutions in your community or your island to work with farmers, because farmers need stability, and part of that stability comes from knowing there's a buyer, you know, for their crop when it's coming. So if they know that, you know, okay, Kuakini Hospital is a small hospital, you know, near us, and if they would purchase, you know, so many pounds of sweet potato from our food hub every month, we could have those standing orders with a lot of farmers that are growing uala, right? So that would really strengthen those farmers' capacity and would also get a healthy complex carbohydrate into the meal plates that go out to all the patients at that hospital. So yeah, as we start looking at the systemic issues, having the institutions be really well connected to the farmers and the food hubs and the food systems and distributors we have, will really start to put a bigger dent in that, you know, 90-10 or 85-15 dynamic we have with, you know, most of the food being imported and not so much of it being local.
Thank you for bringing that like wider lens to the picture of this paradigm. I think we'll flow into our next question here, and that is, how would you define the present day food system within Hawaii if you were to look at it through a localized, regionalized kind of lens or perspective? And what are some good examples of initiatives or programs that are being implemented within different corners of the state you think could serve as potential pieces to this regionalized, localized food system puzzle? We don't have to start in the same order, but it's totally up to you guys. Whoever feels like they
Can I throw out food hubs being an amazing entity, and then I'll let the two experts on it speak on it way better. I just think, again, from professional, personal perspective, investing in our food hubs is a really good start. So Jesse and Noah, please lend some insight, or totally say it's wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, the word that came to mind with the question, right, is, and I think this is hopefully being optimistic, but is transition, right? I mean, you look at the history of our last 2 centuries and our agriculture and food system, right? We've put all our eggs, you know, previously into plantation, into export, into importing our food, and that's put us in a place of difficulty, you know, where we haven't built out the simple social, physical, or economic capital needed to have a local food system, because we've been supporting plantation agriculture and export sugar and pineapple, and that's where we put all our investment over the last century. And so, you know, with the closure of the plantations, and I feel, you know, the emergence and re-importance of the small farmer, you know, I'm tremendously hopeful and optimistic that we are turning right towards a better local food system, a diversified food system, a food system that relies on a broader segment of population and distributes, you know, equity across small farms. But the issue is, again, that you know, we have not built the capacity for that in our history. And so I think there's a lot of work to do, unfortunately, right now to build some of that capacity that allows what we have to work for us in building a good local food system. And, you know, in that thought, I mean, I totally agree with Dexter. I think food hubs are a critical piece of that infrastructure that help bring together small farms, help to aggregate that production, help to build the physical infrastructure that's needed to process and distribute that food, but probably even more important, build the social fabric and the social infrastructure it takes to work together, to collaborate, so that everybody wins, right? And that we're building a system that is supportive and fair, and not all the power held in the hands of a few.
Good comments from you guys. Talk about the food hubs a little bit from our own perspective. That's a popular word right now. So for those who are listening who are somewhat familiar with what a food hub is, it's not always the same thing, but for us at KKV, when we were looking to do some new things with community food, we went out and we talked to folks in the community. We talked to Kupuna, we got feedback. And one of the things we found out is a lot of people were struggling to source their cultural foods, either because of cost or just because of limited access. So we began to work with small farmers around Oahu, primarily, a little bit from other islands, who had those crops, who had ulu, who had kalo, who had cassava, banana, and creating a network of those small farmers. And then we would aggregate their produce to our space and then look for ways to distribute it around Kalihi. And even with that, we started seeing farmers start planting more ulu trees and doing things to prepare down the line, because they knew there was more interest in those cultural foods. The overlap with that is that working for a community health center, a lot of the health conditions we see in the community are diet related. And a lot of those diet related conditions come from people changing their primary starch intake from, you know, the more traditional starches that people were eating, which tend to be complex carbohydrates, really healthy, give you energy over a period of time, to more simple carbs, you know, like white flour, potato, white rice, things like that, which are not necessarily bad foods, but are not as strong nutritionally. So that's how our food hub developed to really address the issue. And it's been pretty successful in the community. And now people are coming to get those foods and are really excited when it's ulu season, or now we have a whole line of folks coming for kalo on a regular basis. So you start to build that up in the community ways. And for us, it's supporting those small farmers. We work primarily with organic farmers because we feel it's healthier for the land than some of the other amendments and chemicals and pesticides that are going into the land. Then it's also healthy for the consumer, and it connects in other ways. A couple other systems and programs, back to your question, that might work. SNAP incentives and double bucks programs have been making a recent impact on the food system. And that's basically for people who get food stamps or SNAP benefits, a way to double their purchasing power if they're buying local produce. So those are grants that may go to a supermarket or someone, and somebody buys $20 worth of local banana, they only have to pay $10 on their EBT for it. So if for low income people, it allows them to purchase more higher quality local produce. Another thing that we do at KKV is food RX, or food prescriptions. So people who have health issues, instead of just being prescribed medicine, they're prescribed foods that can benefit that health condition on a regular basis. And then we source those foods through the food hub from the farmers. So the farmers are, directly addressing the health issues in the community. And then the health center isn't just prescribing pharmaceuticals for people's health conditions. They're also prescribing foods. So those are a few things that I would mention.
That's incredible. As I see it, we have this incredible movement rising from, the soil, rising from these grassroots initiatives. And my question is, right now, this is definitely an alternative to the current mainstream system. How do we make these initiatives, these programs, and our community power the mainstream? How do we make it the system? If anyone has comments.
A lot of them need capital. They need money, which means they need sales. So that's one piece. I think that is a role government can play, especially right now. We saw a food system that was decimated through a pandemic worldwide. So what better time to strengthen our localized food system? I think as consumers, as much as sometimes it does feel it's overplayed, the vote with your fork, like Noah shared earlier, etc. Perfect example. As an organization, our first person that we go to, I don't know if Jesse realizes or not, but the first person we go to when there's internal catering is Jesse, because we want to support an organization like that first. I mean, we could go cheaper. There's bento places that are cheaper, quite honestly, but they don't follow the same mission that we have. And so as a school, encouraging, if there is any type of party, etc., call Kōkua Kalihi Valley. No, maybe not on neighbor islands, but know those organizations that we can support, and in that way vote with our dollar. And again, because we could go cheaper, but just like at least in high school, I have to say this carefully, this is recorded, but I think I can say it anyway. I heard Chef Ann Cooper say this: your food shouldn't be something to the effect of, your food shouldn't be like your high school boyfriend or girlfriend, fast, cheap, and easy. It should be something more substantial that you want to take home to your parents. So same thing. Make sure that's how you spend your dollar.
In terms of really changing the system, yeah, I mean, like, study those local models that are working, even if they're not like drawing a lot of attention to themselves. The fish ponds are great examples of ways that are building local food systems. They're strengthening, the ecology of the shorelines. They're creating food. They're building cultural connections. We should have more of those places that allow people to practice their cultural food practices, strengthen it. And then looking around the world at other places that have good systems. Two places that I've been able to go to and learn a little bit about that are very different, I think are interesting models. One was going to Cuba, where they had a food crisis, where they were out of food, and their solution was to start growing a lot of organic food with small farms. And because that system is more of a communist system, there's not a lot of land cost and whatever. They gave the land free to farmers to grow organic food. And the deal was they had to donate 1/3 of their food to community needs, whatever that was. The government would purchase 1/3 of their food, guaranteed, whether the crop failed or not. It will be purchased in advance, and that will be distributed in the city or whatever. And then the final third, the farmers could sell on the free market and make whatever money they could with that amount of food. And now they have the richest people on that island are actually the mid-sized farmers right now, which is really unique. Another place where I went was Denmark, which is supposed to have, you know, one of the best local food systems in the world. And there, they socialize a lot of their education, healthcare, transportation. So it's, those things are very cheap, but people spend a lot of money for food. Like you go to a restaurant, it's very expensive. But the government has like this green investment fund, which is pumping, you know, billions of dollars into plant-based foods, but it's also helping out like pork processors and folks like that. So the government, even they build like these really cool food courts around the cities. So it makes it easy for a small restaurant or a pop-up person to set up and have a little restaurant. So what they're doing is looking more for private food producers, but the government is investing a lot in the infrastructure to make it easier for people who are small businesses or mid-sized farms to do it. So yeah, look at some of those places where they've worked around the world and they come from different places. So not all of that's going to be applicable to Hawaii, and then blend that with what we see is working locally. And then we'll start to, you know, create a stronger model, I think.
Yeah, and I would build on that a little bit. I'll start with the the pessimistic piece to set it up. You know, I mean, I would just caution everyone to, you know, be aware that not everybody, and in fact, probably not close to the majority of the people, right, really care about a local or regional food system. And you know, being aware of that and being realistic about you know the masses is an important piece of the puzzle. And that relates to what my solution, I think, is to really seek to continue to build bridges, you know, to the other sectors, right? Food is interactive with virtually everything in our society, right? Our environment, our health, our economics, you know, and the more you can, you know, build these bridges between food and other aspects, the broader set of the population we're going to reach. Because some people might not care about a local food system so much, but maybe they really care about, you know, about health. Maybe they really care about the environment. And so, yeah, building these bridges to other sectors, I think is important for drawing more people in and helping people realize the importance of food and how it does really touch virtually every aspect of our life and society.
Noah, you make me think of Keone Lee at Hawaii Investment Ready, because like he's this amazing finance genius and like entrepreneur kind of guy, and is putting together a pretty crazy loan model that I've never seen anywhere else to lower risk, get better and more investment to our food systems sector in Hawaii. So like truly, we need to get folks not only in the choir to be starting to hear and talk about it.
Yes, it's definitely a multifaceted system that involves people outside of this, you know, active role of participation, because everyone has their foot in the food system in some way, shape, or form. And like what you were saying, Noah, food is a bridge of connection. And I think even if they consciously are unaware of their role or even their values towards food, we're all part of the web of life, which is in fact the food web. So I think, you know, at the bottom of it all, and in the end, we all have our blood, sweat, and tears embedded into the system that sustains our very survival. Thus, we all can care. We have the capacity to care. I think it's just about unlocking that capacity. We'll now be going into some individual questions. I think our panelists, moderators, and monitors have created one question for each of you. And so I'll pass it off to Julie to kick us off.
Thank you. That, by the way, that prior discussion was very insightful, and I really enjoyed hearing what everyone had to say. But this question, this is for Dexter. Being a food security and sustainability program manager at the city and county level, what are the main sectors of Oahu's regional food system that need to be reconstructed, in your opinion? And seeing as though Oahu is the state's official food distribution hub, how does this apply to neighboring islands? And if so, is there current day legislation that is going to encourage a change within the current structure of the food system on a country, state, or county level? I'll put this in the chat.
I think I missed the whole thing. Zoom was popping in and out. That's a really hard question. So yeah. Sorry, Zoom's done. No. You know what? I think. Well, no. I'll start with the back. The ending first. There is no legislation that's going to make significant change yet. But with that statement, I don't have any significant policy that I would want to put up now that we're ready for. I don't know if we can fully legislate our way out of the situation we're in. I think we need to continue. I think there's some ancillary points that we need to do, right, around business, around encouraging growth, but also supporting programs. So like one of the programs that we partner with Hawaii Public Health Institute in is a Hawaii Food Garden Fund, where the intent is to get 1,000 gardens started, food gardens started, and gardens that people could access for free. So at Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, they started. It's only in Ulu Tree today, but it'll develop to be more where people can access. The next one was at the Philippine Consulate, and there'll be more that pop up. 1,000 is our goal. So maybe it's starting one on that level, even as a government entity. Two, quite frankly, we need better data on all sectors of this that we don't have. Local ag production, 2017 or something is like the last census data that we have, maybe a little before. So we need better data so we can better steer the ship. Then internally, what we're doing or starting to do is increase the communication from the demand and the supply. So like Jesse mentioned, institutional purchasing. I know that it's not going to solve everything, but it's the one step that we can make, is if we can organize the institutions, the institutional buyers, to throw flags up that say we need 14 tons of cucumbers a year, then the supply can try to meet that. And on the flip side, the supply end can say, but we want to grow lots of kalo. So then the demand will be able to absorb that. So increasing that communication is absolutely essential and doesn't require legislation yet. So those are some of the areas that we've been working on as the city. And also, actually, I'm really excited about this. We just got approval about a month ago, for a food access and equity specialist. So now our city will have 3 positions that will be focusing on food and ag. Sorry, did I answer? Yeah, I think I answered it.
Yes, that was an incredibly elaborate answer. Thank you so much, Dexter, for touching upon that very detailed question. Noah, the next question goes to you. You mentioned in your bio that you have experience in the field of la'au and traditional management for agriculture and ocean resources. And so I was wondering, how did the values of the Native Hawaiian people really shape the intimacy and intricacy of their ancient food ways? And on top of that, how do we combine those principles of practice and culture from the past with the tools of technology and innovation available to us today.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the most important thing, you know, and in a lot of my talks and presentations, I do really try to emphasize that values, right, are they're the drivers, you know, even from a you know, psychological, you know, perspective, you know, it's acknowledged in Western science that, you know, values drive our actions and behaviors. And then the challenging thing is, you know, how do we help facilitate and establish values? You know, there's a few things, you know, I think we know. One is that values are established pretty early in life. So it is essential to work with the youth. You know, it's possible for people to shift their values over time and later in their life, but you know, vast majority of people's values are solidified at a young age. So again, I think working with youth is critical to start laying that foundation. You know, in the Hawaiian and a lot of indigenous examples around the world, right? You know, kinship is just a foundational value, you know, recognizing as you've, you know, beautifully, I think, illustrated at several points, Tyler, you know, the fact that we are, right, part of an intricate web of life and being on the planet, and recognizing that, you know, humans are not exempt, right, from these laws, that we have a relationship, that we influence everything around us. And that is just, we're so far from that right now. You know, unfortunately, I think when you look at, you know, Western ideology, right? I mean, it's embedded in everything that humans have dominion over the planet, right? And it's just a complete opposite over Hawaiian epistemology, Hawaiian worldview, where not only did humans not have dominion over the planet, we were actually the younger brother, right? We had a need to serve and to really listen and take care, to follow instructions of our elder brothers that are in the environment. And that's a really hard shift to make. It's a really big shift, you know, but I think, you know, some of the things that are happening, I mean, something as simple as a school garden, you know, and getting students from an early age, you know, to see how life works, and to see how when you take care of something, it grows larger and richer, and when you don't, things die. And I mean, that's a really foundational lesson of values that it's hard to teach, but yet people will learn with the right experiences. I mean, I would love to see our education system take things like values more seriously, right? Nowhere in your entire educational pathway does anyone teach values, right? They teach you information, they teach you skills, they teach all these things, but they never just talk about fundamental values and how we should be. And so in a lot of our discussions, right, especially when you're working across diverse stakeholders or across different sectors, I think it's really important to start those conversations with what are our values? What are we trying to achieve? Where are we going with this? And always be laying that as our foundation for all the work that we do. Because it's amazing when you have that conversation, how even people across really different sectors a lot of times do have some shared values. You know, you start working with a business loan and they're like, oh, okay, well, they're coming at this from an economic perspective. But if you take a step back in the beginning and really talk about it, a lot of times you'll see that no, like they want to, you know, have a tangible impact on the quality of our lives and our society, It's just that they see economics as the tool for doing that. And so a lot of times I think we approach things with the assumption that there are different goals when in reality there's not. I don't feel like I articulated that well, but I feel like this question is like the question, because I find that values are paramount in terms of what we're collectively going to decide to do as a society.
That was really insightful. I definitely agree with the fact that morals and things that we should, like, not always information, like those aspects of our education, especially about the food system and the environment, are often overlooked. And I think that because of that, that also hinders the education regarding the actual informational parts. So thank you, Noah. Our next question is for Jessie from Roots Cafe. And Roots Cafe is a great example of a nexus point that has encouraged the growth of a local regional food system. And so the question for you, Jessie, is how is the cafe able to provide such sovereign services to the community in a paradigm when many aspects of society are enforcing the opposite?
I think it goes first to what Noah just said, that we come from a place of values in doing it. A lot of Hawaiian land management values influence the development of our program. Healthcare values of just caring about people's health, being community grounded, being that we have a specific area that we focus on. We really listen to who's in the community. We hire people from the community. We build within the community. So that gives us a community grounding. And we look for people who have some shared values with this. The people who are doing this work, who are coming into the cafe, we do that. We look at connections in a strong way. So, spend time building relationships with farmers. So it's not just sourcing the food, but, quarterly, pre-COVID at least, we'll gather for community dinners with farmers. And some of that time would just be hanging out and talking story and eating together. And some of that time will be spent specifically addressing a need or topic within those farmers, doing the same thing with Kapuna in the community, doing the same thing with other nonprofits or government agencies we work with to make sure we get together and build those relationships and have those connections. Those all really help. So I think that's a big part of it, and having fun with it too. Food is a cool thing. Cooking, and sharing food with people. It's, at least for me personally, it's always been a big part of my life. For a lot of folks, it just means more if you can do that in a hands-on way where you know where your food came from, where it brings back something that has an ancestral or family connection, where you're sharing a recipe. That's something we're all doing more of in the culture, and like Noah mentioned earlier, there's a long way to go. There's a lot of people who are disconnected from the food system, but we're moving in a good direction with people reconnecting with food, and find where you fit in. So for us, being more Kalihi centric and a healthcare system, we have our particular perspective, but other folks are going to have a little different ones. So that's what I'd say. And I also just wanted to know, the questions and the moderation of this panel have been really excellent. It's one of the best panels I've been on in a long time. So I just want to give you guys props for your preparation and your handling of the group. Really good. It made it really easy for us to share what we know and what we're thinking about. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And now we're going to have our little Q&A. So if anyone listening has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. But we did have one really good question by Debbie. So she asked, with so many people working on different sectors of transforming our food systems, like how we've had so much representation in this panel, whether it's being in the kitchen, in our classrooms, in our government, how can we see this work as coordinated? And is it to have everyone work towards the transforming Hawaii's food system vision together? And if so, how would that look as a whole?
That's always a difficult piece because sometimes when whether it's real or perceived, when we work together, we lose or think we lose our autonomy. And so maybe overcoming that hurdle is also something. So very gently and graciously getting together to share best practices is a good start. Transforming Hawaii food systems allowed that, I think, allowed just really good talk story, or better said, maybe listening sessions from different folks. I don't know, 2,000 some odd people across the state. Well, that's just a fraction. It's a good start. The city is doing food access micro summits starting in May, starting in Waianae. So listening sessions where we're asking groups to bring the community together, and we're going to just talk about food and food access and things like that. So over the next year and a half, we'll be going through all the communities on Oahu to do this. And we felt that was more effective than doing something big because, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like the data, or maybe in this case, the stories, are pretty disaggregated. And so if we can help play that role to get some of it together, that we can lay it on the wall and see what things come together and what things really, really are broken and need to be fixed that communities perceive is where we're at. And that has been, I think, one of the cries of many people is, can somebody just set a vision so we can all follow? And yet at the same time, when that is done, people go, oh wait, I don't like that vision. I want my vision. So how do we achieve this? Great question. That's why we're starting with 15 people, Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center, and then Ho'aina Omakaha, and then the Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center, bringing people together in their communities to talk story, because I think we've got to rebuild this relationship before we can even kind of make a broad statement on this is our policy that we're going for. Kind of just my thoughts, sorry.
Yeah, I think those are really good comments by Dexter. One thing that we did within the last few years with KKV is we organized with some other folks to start the Hawaii Good Food Alliance, so that we get folks from, different communities, different islands, different approaches to addressing these issues to meet together and coordinate and grow, and then also advocate for what's needed in terms of policy change, being able to have that type of larger entity that can get big pots of money into the community to address these issues, and then knows who needs it or what's the best way to get it out. So we're not, 15 different farms and nonprofits all trying to get grants, where we can have one organization that gets one big grant and then can disperse it to the right people to use the money. That helped a lot for us. And just another thing, ask food producers what they need. They often don't get asked enough or really supported in it. So for farmers and fisher people and stuff like that, what do you need? But having that, like Dexter said, like having that neighborhood conversation, which gets into it, and you can have people from an area ask that question, and make sure, some of those folks are there for the answers. Also, I'm thinking about like working with government. We often focus on the main elected officials, but oftentimes a lot of the work getting done within government is mid-management people. And those are often the people who are most receptive to what needs to be done. So as we work with government, don't think like, oh, your state senator, your state rep is going to create all the solution. Find out who those people are that are in important positions in government, but aren't necessarily a name, and work with those folks and build with those folks, because that will make change faster in many cases.
Wow, I just love all the momentum, all of the incredible solution-based ideas that are rolling in. And I think that this is really a really inspiring conversation that we need right now. I also want to thank all of our panelists for staying on more than 10 minutes after the appropriated time. I think we will now wrap up this panel. Are there any other comments or questions from our panelists or audience members?
Actually, I have been thinking the whole time about what Lisa said about why there are 3 men on this panel. And to somewhat speak for Noah and Jesse, it's because we're available because the Wahine are doing work. They're really busy doing stuff. So we're available to talk story. I think that's what it comes down to, because we have some amazing mana wahine in this space. I mean, Lisa, Debbie, amazing folks. Lydie, I don't know if she's still on, Liv, but at Jesse's organization, Kū, amazing. Noah's wife, breaking down crazy walls, getting ulu into schools, like nuts stuff happening. So yeah, definitely they could have filled this space and then some, but we just coach soccer on the weekends. That's all. No.
I think there's some coincidence with that. Definitely within my circles, within food system work, it's primarily women who are doing the leadership work within it. And even today, my colleague Kristen Oliveira was supposed to be on this panel, but she was just defending her master's thesis on food policy and systems planning. So she wasn't able to register and join in with us. So we missed her voice today. But there's a broad dynamic of women out there who are providing leadership on this. So next panel, have it be 3 wahine, and it'll even out. They're out there for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about just being here and making your voices heard. We don't want to throw you guys under the bus at all, because I think we all have a place to play, a role to play in a piece in this puzzle of life. So again, and thank you for taking the time today to share your mana'o, and thank you for taking the time every day to continue this beautiful transformational work within our food system.
Yeah, thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your day. But thank you for sharing so much with us and really helping us realize that there's so much more we can do, but we're on our way there. So now that we're wrapping this up, we're going to take an hour lunch break, an hour and 10-minute lunch break, so that you can do whatever you want to do, eat, get some rest, stretch, do whatever you need to do. And we will be back with our presentations at 1 o'clock, and we will start off with our